today I'm going to talk about 5 tips that you can use to improve your resilience to anxiety. And this is based off my years of studying and practicing evidence-based mental health, so hopefully you find them helpful too. So let's get into it. The first way that you can increase your resilience to anxiety is to change your relationship with uncertainty. So people who are particularly anxious tend to have a pretty negative relationship with uncertainty. They think that uncertain things or novel things tend to be somewhat dangerous, and also that they wouldn't be able to handle it if that dangerous thing were to occur. Like, for example, what if I lose my job tomorrow? What if I try out that restaurant and I don't like it? What if I ask that person out and they're gonna say no? So all these kind of ambiguous situations are generally seen as both dangerous, threatening, and likely negative. So despite what our emotions are telling us, the logical side of us knows that uncertainty isn't inherently a bad thing. It doesn't mean that a negative or dangerous thing has to happen. It just means that there's a vague situation where we don't know whether the outcome would be good, bad, or somewhere in between. And the whole point then is to be able to change our relationship with uncertainty through a strategy that I often use with my patients called behavioral experiments. So how you engage in a behavioral experiment is super simple. The next time you notice a negative prediction in response to some sort of hypothetical situation, like you're walking down the street, you see something kind of interesting like a new movie or a new restaurant, you're like, ooh, I wonder what that would be like. And your mind immediately says, nah, it's gonna be horrible. You should just kind of avoid it. Don't bother with it. To almost come to more of like a curious stance and say, well, actually, you know what? I don't actually know whether I'll enjoy that movie or, whether I'll enjoy that new restaurant, or if that person I want to ask out will say no. So why don't I give it a shot? Let's just see what would happen when I jump and lean into uncertainty. And as you engage in these experiments on a day-to-day, there's going to be a couple things you're going to realize. Number one, that uncertainty doesn't necessarily always mean bad. It just means that we don't really know what's going to happen. Sometimes it's going to have a bad ending, sometimes a good ending, and sometimes a pretty neutral ending. You might like the restaurant, you might not, or it was kind of mid and you kind of just go on with your life. And that comes to the second idea, where even when things aren't exactly as good as you'd hoped it to be, you learn the lesson that you can survive even when the uncertain situation wasn't exactly a very positive outcome. And this idea kind of nicely segues into my second tip, which is related to increasing your sense of mastery and self-esteem. And the reason why increasing our sense of self-esteem, increasing our sense of mastery is important in the context of anxiety is because we begin to develop greater and greater sense of resilience to these types of uncertain situations, to kind of our fears of what ifs, like, oh, what if I lose my job tomorrow, or what if this bad thing happens? You're able to say, if you have higher levels of self-esteem, that, well, that's going to be okay because I'm going to be able to handle it. I know exactly what I can do. I know my sense of worth to be able to engage in the problem solving needed to address any potential bad things that could occur, even if they're pretty unlikely to happen. So there are a couple of ways that you can increase your sense of self-esteem and general sense of mastery. Number one is just engaging in more productive-based behaviors, more competence-based behaviors, like, for example, doing your chores, going to learn a new language, upskilling in your job by, taking a new certification or taking another course or getting another degree. All of those things increase your sense of productivity, increase your sense of competence, so that you're better able to handle when things don't really go our way. Another great way to increase your sense of self-esteem is to tap into your values, which are essentially these life concepts, these things in your life that are the most important to you. So some common types of values include things like family, hobbies, your work, creativity. It could be really anything that feels, really innately important to you. And then as you come up with your list of different values or domains that really lend towards your self-esteem, the things that are important to your life, think about where are the areas that are a bit lacking. Maybe you're spending a lot of time at work, but not a lot of time with family or on your hobbies. And you want to make sure that, what you're doing in your day-to-day is kind of commensurate or equal to how much weight you put into these different areas of your life, so that if you do notice that there's a little bit of a lacking in, for example, your family, then to, really actively engage in behaviors that are more consistent with that value. Call mom on a night-to-night basis, or set up family dinners, or spend more time with your cousins, whatever it might be, to make sure that you're really meeting those values. Because when you do the things that are important to you and you feel accomplished in these areas, then you're going to develop a greater sense of resilience more generally in your self-esteem. A third way to increase resilience to anxiety is recognizing thoughts don't equal facts. Just because you think something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Like somebody who might be anxious might be thinking, oh, I'm talking to this person right now. They probably think I'm boring. And when they have that thought, they almost kind of just believe it. They just think, okay, like I had that thought, must be true. And they begin to act as if that thought were true. But when we take a step back, a lot of the thoughts that we have, these mind reading thoughts, these catastrophic thoughts, these thoughts that we have on a day to day, these worries, these what if questions, they're just kind of thoughts that kind of pop up. We tend to grab onto them, think that there's something important about them, that they have to be true. But in reality, we don't really know if it's true. And certainly you can kind of check the facts to see if the situation really meets the demands of what that thought was. Does it actually fit the facts of the situation, this thought? But generally speaking, we put a lot of salience into them when they may not actually have a lot of substance. So just even checking, like, I had this thought right now. Does it even make sense? That kind of creates a bit of psychological distance so that the thought doesn't have as much power over you. And then tip number 4 is related to continuing to open up your world. So oftentimes when we start to feel anxious, we start to close up our worlds. We stop doing things that are interesting or unique or a little bit in that sort of uncertain space. We stop going outside as much. We stop doing things like interacting with other people. And as we begin to get, smaller and smaller in our world, we improve the pain in the short term, but in the long term, this is going to maintain anxiety. It's kind of like an exposure therapy. Oftentimes, the way that for us to reduce anxiety about, let's say, dogs is spending more time with dogs, or, if we're afraid of social situations, we don't want to avoid social situations because that will only help in the short term. We actually want to get out there and start talking to people to really build up our world, open up our world, and realize that it doesn't have to be as dangerous as we think it is. So if you do notice that your anxiety is starting to shrink up your world a little bit, do your best, take small steps at a time to do small things that allow you to open up your world. Go to that new event or go outside and talk to somebody or, reach out to an acquaintance. Do something that would help open up your world more and more to be able to make sure that the anxiety never takes you away from being able to live your own life worth living. And finally, the 5th way to be able to increase our resilience to anxiety is to change our relationship with the anxiety itself and thank anxiety for being there. Our anxiety protects us. It's not meant to try to harm us, to try to kill us. Like, our anxiety is there because it's a safety signal to say, hey, like, there's something here that feels uncomfortable, it feels dangerous, and I'm just telling you that there's something around. And your job is to be able to say, hey, like, thanks for, reminding me of this. And in this situation, I actually think it's going to be okay. Or you might say, oh, actually, you're right, anxiety. It's time for me to get out of this situation because there is something innately dangerous. But when we have a sort of back and forth fight with our anxiety, when we hate the sensations that anxiety gives us, when we're really reactive to the thoughts that anxiety tells us, we tend to have sort of this really terrible relationship with anxiety, which only adds fuel to the fire. So the last tip would be to really say, hey, like, thank your anxiety for doing its job. Thank your anxiety for keeping you safe. And sometimes let anxiety know everything's going to be okay and you're going to be okay. And as a result, you and your anxiety can work with each other rather than against each other. And I recognize it's kind of vague advice, so one small thing that you can do to change your relationship with anxiety is to sit differently with the physical symptoms. So, next time you notice the racing heart, the shallow breathing, the, tense muscles, recognize that even though they're kind of uncomfortable, they're not dangerous, they're not life-threatening, and they're really just trying to send you a message to say that something here is a little bit spooky, and just be mindful of that and do your best to kind of re-regulate if needed. If the anxiety isn't really necessary, do some deep breathing, splash your face with some cold water, or if the anxiety is saying something important, then maybe getting out of that situation might be a good idea. So hopefully this video was helpful for you to learn a little bit more about the different ways that we can increase our resilience to anxiety, at least from one psychologist's perspective. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.